Hello, everyone, and welcome to AP US History for Winners with your teacher, Mr. Johnson. Now, last time we talked about Manifest Destiny, and today we are talking about the Mexican American War and the Compromise of 1850. So, if you are ready, let's begin. Now, before we get into the Mexican American War, I'm going to give you a little bit of context to the war, a little bit of events that lead up to it. So, what are the events that lead up to the war? First is the election of 1844. We talked about this in our last time, but this is the election where Henry Clay, the Whig, is going up against James K. Polk, the Democrat, and the Democrat Polk wins because he believes in manifest destiny. He wants to annex Texas. That helps him win the election. Now, another event that leads into this is the Slidell mission to Mexico. So remember we told you how America took over parts of Texas before. And so Polk wants to basically purchase some more land and settle this boundary dispute along the Texas border with Mexico. But Mexico refuses to take the Slidell mission. They refuse to listen to these people. Okay. And that leads us to April 25th, 1846, where Mexico supposedly attacks U.S. troops on U.S. soil. And this is going to enrage a lot of people in America, and they're going to be ready to go to war with Mexico. Not everyone buys the story, though. And there are some people like Abraham Lincoln, not president yet, but Abraham Lincoln in the government, he brings up what's called the spot resolutions, where he wants to find out exactly where is the spot that the soldiers died. He doesn't think that they died on U.S. soil. He doesn't buy what Polk is saying. Lincoln's trying to avoid the war, but he doesn't really get listened to. But it's important to know, especially because Lincoln's going to become so important later. So America does get involved in the Mexican-American War. It takes place from 1846 to 1848. One important battle, maybe not, you don't need to know the name of it, but is the Battle of Buena Vista. But what is important about it is that General Zachary Taylor is the general for this battle. And because of his actions in this battle, becomes a hero and eventually leads him becoming a president in 1848. So we often see, again, how war heroes become presidents. Okay, we saw that with Andrew Jackson, George Washington. Okay, we'll see that again, Zachary Taylor and others. At the end of the war, we get the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848. Now, America wins this war, and when they win, America is going to gain California, modern-day New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and Nevada. That's a ton of land. That's about half of Mexico's land at the time. In exchange for this, America is also going to pay Mexico $15 million just to make everybody happy with the situation. A few years later, there is an event called the Gadsden Purchase in 1853, where America purchases more land from Mexico that's a little bit south of that land that we get in the Mexican-American War. It's called the Mexican Cession. America wants to try to build a railroad through it, and the Gadsden Purchase was the best area to build the railroad through, so that's why they want to purchase that land. Okay, so what are the effects of this war? Well, first of all, America increases its size by about a third because of the Mexican Cession. The Mexican Cession is the land America gets from the war, so big increase in America's land. We also get some future leaders coming out of this, like Zachary Taylor, like Grant and Lee, which will be future presidents, future generals. Lastly, and maybe most importantly, is the idea of the debate over slavery, because every time America gets new land, what's the question that has to be asked? Well, is this new land going to allow slavery or not? And also, again, a lot of this land that America got, as we always talk about new land, there's Native Americans there. What are we doing with Native Americans that are living on this land? Okay, so that's the Mexican-American War for you. And there's just a little map just so you can kind of see. Red is the land that America gets from the Mexican-American War. And then in beige is that Gadsden Purchase where America wants to build that railroad through. So we purchase more of that. Okay, and south of that is where Mexico is. All right, another topic here that I want to bring up, it's sort of related because America gets access to California in the Mexican-American War, is the California Gold Rush. So America gets access to California in the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848, and that is when gold is discovered in 1848. And when they discover gold in California, it's going to cause about 300,000 people to move there in a span of 7 years from all over the country, hoping to strike it rich. And if you've ever heard of the San Francisco football team, the San Francisco 49ers, 1849 was really when the people started to move to California to get gold. And that's why their San Francisco's team is called that. That's why their colors are red and gold, okay, if you're into football. All right, anyway, so as people move to California, we're going to get a lot of sectional tension between the North and the South over is California going to be free or is it going to be slave? Remember, this issue is really big because it's going to upset the balance of free and slave states in the Congress, right, in the government. Now, California wants to ban slavery. They create a constitution that bans slavery, and then they ask Congress for admission as a free state. Now, Congress really wants to make California a state because there's a lot of money in California, there's a lot of gold, there's a lot of resources, and so they're trying to accelerate this process, but they can't figure out what are we going to do about the status of California as a free or slave state, what to do. And this is just kind of an emphasis of this idea here. What does America do with slavery and new land that they get? So this is a huge, important understanding you need to have. When America gets new land in the 1800s, the status of slavery has to figure out. For example, in the Mexican Cession, there is a crisis. All this new land that we got, is it free? Is it slave? What's going to happen? Before the Mexican Cession, there's a perfect balance of 15 free states and 15 slave states, as you see in that map on the right, which means that there is an even number of representation in Congress for free and slave states. And slavery is a hot, big topic that both sides want to figure out, but they're afraid of having one state get too much power because the other side would be drowned out. Okay. So Southerners at this time are getting very defensive over slavery. We talked about how they're moving to that positive good argument, and they're also getting defensive because they see the North trying to take slavery away. If we go back to Unit 4, we talked about the Talmadge Amendment. That was an amendment that would try to free slaves after they turned 25. It never actually happens, but the South feels threatened from that. There's also something called the Wilmot Proviso. Okay, this is an unsuccessful attempt to ban slavery in all the land from the Mexican Cession after the Mexican-American War. Unsuccessful, but it wanted to happen. So the South, again, is afraid. And then I'm sure you've heard it before, but the Underground Railroad, where a lot of people in the North are helping slaves escape. And there's like a little bit of a route for slaves to escape either north to the northern states or to Canada or even sometimes south to Mexico. And so all this stuff is very threatening to the South. And so some southern states at this point threaten to secede. They threaten to form their own country, but they don't go through with it because they got to figure out how we're going to solve this tension. All right. And so who comes in? No other than Henry Clay, the great compromiser. And he comes in with a compromise called the Compromise of 1850. Now, the Compromise of 1850 has a few parts to it. And it's pictured here on this map. I'll blow that map up a little bit in the next slide. But here's the main thing. California is going to be a free state. So it's a big gain for the Northerners. They get California as a free state. And then they're going to set up Utah and New Mexico as territories. And when they become states, they're going to use something called popular sovereignty to determine if they're states. Popular sovereignty is a very important term. You need to understand this term because we're going to need to know it for more stuff in this unit. Popular sovereignty means that they're going to allow Utah and New Mexico to vote by popular vote over if they should have slavery or not. So that's their idea. We'll let these new states, these new areas, they'll let them vote. Now, we're going to get some concessions because both these things are a little bit more advantage to the North. So what are some concessions to the South? Well, they're going to one more thing to help out the North is they're going to ban the slave trade in Washington, D.C. They don't ban slavery there, but they don't allow you to buy or sell slaves because people felt like it didn't look good for foreign countries to come in and seeing America buying and selling slaves. America's one of the last countries that has slaves. Now, what does the South get out of this, though? Right? That's what I want to talk about. The South gets this thing called a fugitive slave law. And it is a very important law, and it angers a lot of Northerners. This is going to mean that if a slave escapes to the North, Northerners have to return the slaves. They have to notify the police. Northerners who assisted any slaves in escaping could be arrested for assisting them. Okay. Furthermore, it says that slaves could not even testify in court on any issues. All right. This is going to create a bunch of tension in between the North and the South, because now essentially the Southern laws are being inflicted on the North, and the North doesn't feel great about this. This is a huge cause for tension, the new fugitive slave law. Make sure we know that term. Okay, so here's the map blown up a little bit more so you can kind of see on the left, you have California admitted as a free state. We see in purple, those states are going to be popular sovereignty, meaning those when Utah and Mexico become states, they'll be able to vote on whether or not there's slavery. All the states in yellow are slavery. Everything in green is going to have free, either a state or the territory that will have free. And then we have all that land, the unorganized territory in orange, some of that's gained from the Louisiana Purchase, still not states yet. We still have to figure out when enough people move there and they become states, what's going to happen with that, slave or free. All right, that's it for today. That's it for our notes on the Mexican-American War and the Compromise of 1850. Let's talk about our big ideas, though. Let's make sure we understand this stuff. So first, every time there's new land gained in the 1800s, what decision needs to be made? Hopefully you know that by now. Number two, what are the causes of the Mexican-American War? And number three, what are the effects of the Mexican War? So that's it. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time.